My name is Elijah Thornhorn. I'm 72 years old, retired, and I live right here in the old section of South Detroit. What I'm going to tell you today is something that completely changed my life and shook the foundations of everything I thought I knew. It's the story of how an innocent comment from my sweet little grandson uncovered a terrible secret I could never have imagined. It was a typical Sunday, one of those Sundays filled with sunshine, barbecue smoking in the backyard, and the sound of children's laughter ringing through the house. My grandson, Wesley, a boy barely 5 years old, was playing in the garage while I was watering the plants. I always liked keeping my small yard neat and tidy. Lenore, my wife of almost 50 years, was in the kitchen finishing up dinner. Our life was simple, peaceful. At least that's what I thought. That's when I heard his tiny voice calling out to me. "Grandpa? Grandma's car smells bad." I smiled and didn't think much of it. Kids are always making those strange observations, right? I just kept watering my ferns. "No, Grandpa, seriously, it smells like blood." That word made me stop. Blood. What kind of thing was that for such a little boy to say? "What nonsense are you talking, Wesley? It's just your imagination," I replied, trying to brush it off. But he insisted with that stubbornness only a child can have. "It's not, Grandpa. It smells just like the butcher shop my daddy takes me to. It smells like blood." Right then, right there, something froze inside me. Kids have that sharp perception, that raw honesty that we adults lose over time. And Wesley wasn't the type to make things up. He was an observant, sensitive boy. I dropped the hose and walked over to Lenore's car, an old Chevy Malibu that she insisted on keeping, even though I suggested she trade it in for a newer model after I retired. "It works perfectly for what I need," she always said, and I never questioned it. I opened the driver's side door, and sure enough, there was a strange smell. It wasn't strong, but it was there. Something metallic, a little sweet. Maybe Wesley was right. I vaguely remembered the smell from the butcher shop, but I tried to tell myself it was just some forgotten trash, maybe leftovers from a grocery run. "Must be garbage, son. Grandma probably forgot something in here," I said, closing the door, wanting to end the discussion. That's when Lenore appeared at the garage doorway. Her face, usually serene, was tense, her eyes wide. "What are you two doing in my car?" Her voice was louder than normal. "Get out of there, Elijah, and take that boy inside." Her reaction took me by surprise. It was completely disproportionate, exaggerated. In almost 50 years together, I had rarely seen Lenore lose her composure like that. And why? We were just looking at the car. I took Wesley inside, trying to distract him with cartoons on the television. But Lenore's reaction kept hammering at my brain for the rest of the day. Dinner went normally, but there was a tension in the air. Lenore avoided my gaze. She answered in monosyllables, and, even stranger, kept glancing at the clock every few minutes. After our son took Wesley home, Lenore said she was tired and went to bed early. I stayed in the living room watching the news, but I couldn't pay attention. That strange smell in the car, Lenore's over-the-top reaction, something wasn't right. When I was sure she was asleep, I took the car keys, which were hanging on the hook, in the kitchen. I slipped silently back into the garage, my heart pounding hard in my chest. What would I find in that car? Did I really have the courage to look? Sometimes, the truth is too heavy a burden to carry. At that moment, I could still turn back, pretend nothing happened, and go on with my quiet, retired life. But what my grandson had smelled in that car wouldn't let me be. I opened the car door. The smell seemed stronger now in the stillness of the night. I switched on my cell phone flashlight, lighting up the interior. The seats looked normal, the glove compartment too. That's when I decided to check the trunk. Before opening the trunk, I just stood there for a few moments, my hand shaking as I held the key. I thought back on my life with Lenore, a story that began when we were practically kids ourselves. I was born and raised right here in this same section of South Detroit, when there were still plenty of empty lots and the streets weren't fully paved. My father worked at the old Midwest Auto Parts plant, and my mother cared for me and my 4 siblings. Life was hard, but we never lacked the basics, especially the love of those 2. I met Lenore when I was 15. She moved with her family to our neighborhood, coming up from rural Alabama. Her father had gotten a job at the same plant as mine. I remember it like it was yesterday. Lenore getting out of the moving truck, wearing a simple floral dress, her hair pulled back in a braid. She was shy, and she spoke with that soft southern accent that I thought was so beautiful. In the beginning, she was quiet, but little by little, she opened up. I discovered that behind that shyness was a smart, determined young woman. Lenore was the brightest in our school group. She dreamed of being a nurse. She said she wanted to help people, to save lives. One day, I'm going to work at a big city hospital. Elijah, you'll see, she'd tell me, her eyes shining with hope. And that's exactly what happened. While I stayed working at the factory like my father, Lenore studied, completed her registered nurse training, and fought against the prejudice of the time that said family women shouldn't work outside the home. She got a job at Metropolitan General Hospital and built a respectable career, always dedicated, always willing to take extra shifts, always wanting to help. We married young, me at 22 and her at 20. The celebration was simple, held in the church hall down the street. Our first house was a small rental, but to us, it was a palace. We worked hard. We saved every cent to realize the dream of owning our own home, which only came true after the birth of our son. Lenore was always a devoted wife, a loving mother. Sometimes she'd come home exhausted from her shifts, but she still found the energy to prepare a special barbecue on Sunday, to tend to the garden she loved so much, and to help our son with his schoolwork. When our son grew up, got married, and gave us Wesley, it felt like our happiness was complete. Watching Lenore hold our grandson, singing the same lullabies she sang for our son, made me believe we had built a good life. Despite all the hardships, we were never rich. We lived with dignity. My factory pension wasn't much. Her nursing technician's pension wasn't either, but it was enough to live on, to pay the bills, to buy Wesley a few gifts at Christmas. At least, that's what I thought. There were signs, maybe small details that seemed unimportant at the time, but which now, looking back, took on a somber meaning. Like her sudden trips out, always with the car, saying she was going to visit a sick friend or help someone in the neighborhood. Lenore had always been charitable, always willing to lend a hand to anyone who needed it. Why would I be suspicious? Or the cell phone she never left unattended, always protected by a password, always charging in the bedroom. It has a lot of hospital information on it. Elijah, confidential patient stuff. You understand? And I understood. Or I believed I understood. Or those envelopes of cash that sometimes showed up, which she claimed were from working extra hours, caring for private patients. It wasn't a lot, but it helped with household expenses, especially after the cost of my blood pressure medicine, and her diabetes medication started to strain the budget. The strangest thing, maybe, was that cooler she started keeping in the trunk. It's for keeping the nurses' lunches fresh at the hospital, she explained when I asked her about it once, and I never questioned it again. Standing there in the garage with the trunk key in my hand, all those little details rushed back to my mind, like pieces of a puzzle I'd never tried to put together. Maybe for comfort, maybe for fear of what I'd find. The cold night air raised the hair on my arms. Or maybe it was the premonition of what was to come. Deep down, a part of me already knew that after opening that trunk, our life would never be the same again. The phone rang inside the house, startling me. It was almost 11 o'clock at night. Who would call at that hour? I hesitated, thinking of going back inside to answer, but the phone stopped ringing after the third chime. Lenore had probably woken up and answered it. This was the moment. I took a deep breath and opened the trunk. The smell hit me like a punch. Now there was no doubt. It was blood. That unmistakable, metallic odor. I was trembling as I shone my phone's flashlight into the interior. In the trunk was a cooler, bigger than I had imagined, with the lid slightly ajar. A dark stain was spreading out of it onto the car's lining. And that's when I saw the true horror that my wife of 50 years was hiding from me. With shaking hands, I fully opened the cooler lid. What I saw inside chilled me to the bone. Clear plastic bags filled with a dark red liquid. Blood bags. There must have been about 20 of them, neatly organized side by side, some with an official seal that I recognized immediately. Metropolitan General Hospital. 2 of those bags were torn at the corner, slowly leaking their contents. That's where the smell my grandson had noticed was coming from. On the side of each bag were labels with barcodes, blood types, collection dates, everything official, everything very real. There was no denying what I was seeing. Next to the bags was a makeshift refrigeration system with some melted ice packs, and worse, a folder with documents. I opened it with fingers that were growing increasingly shaky, and I found what looked like a handwritten list of names, addresses, and amounts. Next to each name was the figure of $50. $50 per bag. My God. Lenore was selling stolen blood. I sat down on the garage floor, stunned. The person I had shared half a century of my life with was involved in something so terrible, so criminal. Why? For money. Our situation wasn't that bad. Or was it? I remembered the Lenore I met, the young idealist who just wanted to help people. How did we get to this point? My first love, the only woman in my life, the mother of my son, the grandmother of my grandson. An entire life built together day after day, joys, sorrows, triumphs, defeats, all shared. Or so I thought. Who was this woman who slept next to me every night? This stranger who was stealing blood from a hospital to sell on the black market? I don't know how long I sat there on the cold garage floor, staring at those blood bags. Minutes, hours. Time seemed to have stopped. It was the sound of footsteps that brought me back to reality. Lenore was standing in the garage doorway, wearing her faded blue bathrobe, her gray hair messy. On her face was an expression I had never seen before, a mix of fear and rage. "What are you doing, Elijah?" she asked, her voice controlled, low, almost a hiss. I looked at her. Then I looked at the open trunk, the exposed blood bags. "The question is, what are you doing, Lenore?" I replied, getting up with difficulty. My legs felt like jelly. "What the hell is all this?" She hesitated for a moment, looking around as if searching for an escape route. Then she straightened her shoulders. That gesture I knew so well from when she decided to face a problem. "It's for donation, Elijah. I take it to health clinics in the rougher parts of town that don't have enough blood." A lie, a blatant lie, right to my face, 50 years together. And she was lying while looking directly into my eyes. I shook my head and held up the folder with the list of names and amounts. Don't lie to me, Lenore. Not now. After everything we've shared, you're selling this blood. Her face hardened. The eyes I had always found so sweet now seemed cold, calculating. You don't understand, Elijah. You would never understand. Then explain it to me, I yelled, losing control. Explain why my wife is stealing blood from a hospital. Blood that could save lives, just to sell for cash. She took a step toward me, then stopped. For an instant, I saw a flicker of the old Lenore in her eyes, vulnerable, frightened, but it quickly vanished. Do you think our pension is enough to live on? To pay for your blood pressure medicine, which gets more expensive every month? To help our son when he's struggling? To buy gifts for Wesley? It doesn't justify it, Lenore. Nothing justifies this, I said, pointing at the trunk. I started 5 years ago, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. A friend at the hospital offered it to me. She said it was easy money, that nobody cared, that there was blood to spare. And you believed her? You, who worked in a hospital your whole life, who knows how precious blood is, how much it can be needed? She looked away. At first, it was just once in a while, a bag or two, that was going to expire anyway. Then it got easier. The money helped so much. And who do you sell to, Lenore? Who buys blood like this without knowing where it came from, without proper testing? Her silence gave me the answer. Back alley clinics, desperate people. And who guaranteed that blood was safe, that it wasn't contaminated? How many people could be at risk because of this scheme? There are other people involved, right? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Someone inside the hospital stealing the bags for you, and people you sell to. Lenore didn't answer, but her look said it all. It was an organized network, and my wife was just a piece of it. A transporter, a vendor. You know this is a crime, right? You could go to jail for this. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. And you're going to turn me in, Elijah? After 50 years together, you're going to send your wife to prison? The question hung between us, heavy as lead. What should I do? What was the right thing? 50 years of a marriage, of shared life, against this terrible crime that put lives at risk. I have to think, I finally said. This is too much to process all at once. There's nothing to think about, she replied, and her voice now held a threatening tone I had never heard before. You're going to close that trunk, go inside, and forget what you saw. Those bags won't be here tomorrow, and we will never speak of this again. I looked at the woman in front of me, the gray hair I had so often caressed, the hands that had so often held mine, now clenched like claws. And I realized I didn't know her anymore. Maybe I had never truly known her. I can't do that, Lenore, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Her eyes narrowed. You don't have a choice. There, in that cold garage, with the smell of blood filling the air, I felt like an abyss had opened between us, an abyss too deep to cross. And I thought about my little grandson, Wesley, who with his innocence had unraveled all this horror. I thought about what he would say if he knew that the grandmother who made him peach cobbler on Sundays was involved in something so terrible. At that moment, I realized that the hardest decision of my life was before me, and whatever my choice, nothing would ever be the same. I spent the night awake, sitting in the living room armchair, while Lenore went back to bed as if nothing had happened. How could she sleep after that conversation? After everything I had discovered? My head was spinning with thoughts, memories, doubts. I thought about our son, how devastated he would be if he knew, and about Wesley, so small, so innocent, and how our family would be destroyed if this came to light. But I also thought about the people receiving that blood, stolen blood without proper control. What if it was contaminated? What if it caused someone's death? How many lives had already been put at risk in the 5 years Lenore had been involved in this scheme? When the first rays of sunlight began to shine through the window, I was still there, motionless, my eyes burning with exhaustion and anguish. I heard Lenore get up, shower, and get dressed, just like any normal day, as if the previous night hadn't existed. She appeared in the living room, already dressed, with a bag slung over her shoulder. "I'm going out," she announced dryly. "I'll be back this afternoon." I didn't ask where she was going. I knew she was going to get rid of those blood bags, hand them over to whoever paid for them, and continue as if nothing had changed. "I hope you've thought this through, Elijah," she added from the doorway. "For the sake of our family. Our family." As if what she was doing was protecting it and not tearing it apart. After she left, I spent some time watching the street through the living room window. Our neighborhood in South Detroit had changed so much over the years. When we moved here, everything was simple, almost rural. Today it was a bustling neighborhood, full of businesses and apartment buildings. There were still old neighbors, like Miss Clara from the bakery, who knew every detail of our lives. What would she say if she knew what Lenore was doing? Around mid-morning, my cell phone rang. It was our son, asking if he could drop Wesley off with us that afternoon, as he had some things to take care of at work. "Sure, son," I replied, feeling a knot in my throat. "Bring the boy. Grandma should be back this afternoon, but I'm here." When I hung up, I realized I needed to make a decision before Wesley arrived. I couldn't leave him in this house, with that secret hanging in the air, with that criminal scheme happening right under our roof. I picked up my cell phone again and stared at the screen. What was I going to do? Call the police? Turn in my own wife? One thing was certain. I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen anything. I couldn't let it continue. It was only a matter of time before someone got hurt, or worse. After much hesitation, I dialed the police number, not 911, but the phone for the local precinct 12. There was an investigator there, Detective Hayes, whom I'd known for a long time, a serious, discreet man. When they answered, I asked to speak with him. After each minutes of waiting, that felt like an eternity, I heard his deep voice on the other end of the line. "Hayes, speaking." I took a deep breath. "Detective Hayes, this is Elijah Thorne. I need to report on something complicated." I told him everything about the blood bags in my wife's trunk, the list of buyers, the 5-year scheme. I made sure not to mention Lenore's name initially, just describing the situation. He listened in silence, asking only a few sharp questions. "It's a delicate situation, Elijah," he finally said. "We're talking about a serious crime. Theft of hospital supplies, illegal commerce, possible risk to public health. I need to know who's involved." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's my wife, Hayes, Lenore." There was a long silence on the other end. Hayes knew Lenore. We had even been to barbecues together back when his son and mine played on the same basketball team. "Are you sure about this, Elijah? That's a very serious accusation." "I saw it with my own eyes." She confessed. More silence. "I understand. Look, this is going to need a careful investigation. I can't just show up invading your house with a warrant. You understand? It would be messy. I agreed. Messy was an understatement. It would be devastating. What do you suggest? Give me some time. I'm going to investigate discreetly. Check at the hospital for any record of missing blood bags. Identify the others involved. I need to build a solid case before acting. I thanked him and hung up, my heart heavier than ever. Had I done the right thing, or had I just betrayed 50 years of marriage? A few hours later, my son arrived with Wesley. The boy was excited, talking about a new cartoon he wanted to show me, about how he had learned to tie his own shoes. "Where's Grandma?" he asked, looking around. "She went out, son. She'll be back later," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's going to bring back some more of that peach cobbler. The one she makes is delicious." I forced a smile. "Let's go watch TV." While Wesley played in the living room, my son called me into the kitchen. He looked worried. "Dad, is everything okay? You look tired." I wanted so badly to tell him, to share this terrible burden. But how could I destroy the image he had of his own mother? How could I place this devastating revelation on his shoulders? "Just a restless night, son. Nothing to worry about." He didn't seem convinced, but didn't press the issue. He left shortly after, saying he would return at the end of the day to pick up Wesley. I spent the afternoon trying to act normally with my grandson. We played dominoes. We watched cartoons on the television. We snacked on grilled cheese and orange juice. I tried to smile, to joke, to be the grandpa I always was. But inside, I was dying of anguish, dreading the moment Lenore would return and what would happen next. The storm, I knew, was coming. The kitchen clock marked almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon when I heard the sound of the gate. Lenore was back. Wesley ran to the door. "Grandma! Grandma!" I watched her enter, bending down to hug our grandson, smiling at him as if she were the most innocent grandmother in the world. Her eyes met mine over the boy's head, cold, questioning. Lenore played with Wesley for a while, then went to the bedroom to change her clothes. She returned wearing her favorite pantsuit, the dark blue one I had given her for her birthday 2 years ago. "We need to talk," she murmured, as she passed me in the kitchen, where I was washing the snack dishes. "When Wesley leaves," I replied in the same tone. She nodded and went back to the living room, where she turned on a cartoon channel. Wesley snuggled up next to her on the sofa, innocent, oblivious to the tension that dominated the house. A little later, Lenore's cell phone rang. She answered quickly, speaking in a low tone that I couldn't understand. When she hung up, her face had gone pale. Something had changed. Something was happening. And I had no idea what it could be. My son arrived around 7 o'clock to pick up Wesley. When the two of them left, the silence that fell over the house was almost deafening. Finally, we were alone. Lenore and I, 50 years of marriage and an abyss of betrayal between us. "What did you do, Elijah?" she asked with a voice that didn't sound like hers, a voice I had never heard before. "What do you mean?" I replied, though I knew exactly what she meant. Lenore walked up to me, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never witnessed. "Don't play dumb. I got a call. Someone is asking questions at the hospital about missing blood bags. Coincidence, maybe." I kept my gaze steady, even though I felt my heart speeding up. "Maybe it was inevitable, Lenore. These kinds of things don't go unnoticed forever." She studied me for a long moment. Then she let out a dry, humorless laugh. "It was you. You turned me in." I neither confirmed nor denied it. I just held her gaze. 50 years together, Elijah. 50 years, sharing the same bed, the same life, and you betray me like this? I betrayed you. Indignation rose in my throat like fire. Me? You're stealing blood from a hospital, Lenore, selling it on the black market, putting lives at risk. And I betrayed you? She backed away a step, surprised by my outburst. I rarely raised my voice. I was always the calm, conciliatory type. You don't understand, she muttered, shaking her head. You would never understand. Then explain it to me, I demanded. Explain how the woman I knew, who loved to help others, who dedicated her life to caring for the sick, turned into a criminal. Lenore slumped heavily onto the sofa. Suddenly she looked much older, much more tired. The wrinkles were deeper, her shoulders hunched. It started small, she finally said, staring at her own hands, hands that had helped so many people, hands that now hid a terrible crime. A bag here, a bag there, bags that were going to expire, that would be thrown out anyway. And who convinced you of that? Who recruited you for this scheme? She hesitated. Kendra. Do you remember her? We worked together in the emergency department. I vaguely recalled a tall woman with a shrill voice who sometimes called our house looking for Lenore about extra shifts. She said it was easy, that nobody would miss it, that the system was so bureaucratic and inefficient, that a few bags one way or another wouldn't make a difference. And you believed her? You, who worked inside there your whole life, who knew the system inside and out? Lenore rubbed her face with her hands in a gesture of deep weariness. At first I questioned it. But the money was so good, Elijah. You have no idea how much they pay for a bag of blood on the black market. $50 a bag, I said. I saw the list in the car. She nodded. Think about what that meant for us. For our miserable pension, for the increasingly expensive medicines, for helping our son when he lost his job, for buying decent gifts for Wesley at Christmas. It doesn't justify it, Lenore. It doesn't justify it. Not for you, who always lived in your righteous little world, she exploded, standing up again. Who never had to make difficult choices, who never had to get your hands dirty. Her words hit me like a slap. Difficult choices, as if she had no alternatives, as if her only option was to steal blood from patients who needed it. And what alternatives did you have? Tell me, go look for another job at 63 years old? Beg? Sell cookies outside the school? Anything would be better than this, I shouted, pointing toward the window in the direction of the garage, where the car, now empty, still held the scent of that crime. We stood in silence for a moment, both breathing heavily, both shaking with rage and frustration. How much? I finally asked. How much what? How much did you make from this over the past 5 years? How much was it worth to destroy our family, our dignity? She looked away. I don't know exactly. Maybe around $20,000. The sum made me dizzy. $20,000. A fortune for us, simple folks. Enough money to change our lives. And where is that money? I asked, looking around as if I expected to see stacks of bills hidden in the corners. Part of it went to help our son when he lost his job. Part for that bathroom remodel, for Wesley's gifts, for your blood pressure medicine that the insurance wouldn't cover. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. So, I myself had benefited from that dirty money without knowing it. I had taken medicine bought with the blood of sick people. And the rest? She hesitated. In an account in Kendra's name. Of course. Lenore was too smart to leave a trail of unexplained money. She used a proxy, someone who was probably getting a cut for holding the money for her. Who else is involved, Lenore? Who supplies the bags? Who do you sell them to? She shook her head. I'm not turning anyone in. It's bad enough that you turned me in. People could be dying because of this scheme, I insisted. Did you ever think about that? Did you think about who receives that blood without knowing where it came from? Without proper testing? The tests are done, Elijah, she shot back defensively. Kendra handles that. She has lab access. And you actually believe that? That a criminal scheme cares about people's safety? About following protocols? For the first time, I saw a shadow of doubt cross her face, a flicker of hesitation. Maybe she had never truly considered the consequences of her actions, or maybe she had convinced herself there were no victims, that it was a victimless crime. Ironically, the phone rang, interrupting our argument. I answered reluctantly. It was Hayes. Elijah, we need to talk now. It's urgent. Something in his voice alarmed me. What happened? I can't talk over the phone. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Be ready. I hung up, feeling a shiver run down my spine. Lenore was watching me, tense. Who was that? A friend, I replied vaguely. I need to go out. In the middle of this conversation. It's important. She narrowed her eyes. Suspicious. It's the police, isn't it? You really turned me in. I didn't answer. Just went to the bedroom to get my wallet and ate. When I returned, Lenore was on the phone, talking quickly and in a low voice. As soon as she saw me, she hung up abruptly. Who was that? I asked. A friend, she replied, imitating my earlier evasion. We stood there, staring at each other. Two strangers in the same house. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder than normal, marking the time of a marriage that was collapsing before my eyes. What's going to happen now, Elijah? She asked. And for the first time that night, her voice betrayed fear. Before I could answer, I heard the doorbell. Hayes had arrived. I opened the door and found him standing there, his face grim. He wasn't in uniform, never was, but something in his posture betrayed the police officer. Elijah, he greeted me with a short nod. His eyes darted past me and fixed on Lenore, who was standing in the middle of the living room. Mrs. Thorne. She didn't respond, just crossed her arms defensively. May I come in? Hayes asked, more out of formality than actually asking permission. I stepped aside, allowing him entry. He walked to the center of the room, looking around as if searching for something. I need both of you to come down to the precinct 12, he announced directly. Lenore paled. Am I being arrested? Hayes shook his head. Not yet, but we need to clear up some things, and fast. What things? I asked, sensing that something else was happening. Something I didn't know. Hayes hesitated, his eyes moving between Lenore and me. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. We found a body in the suburbs. A man about 40 years old. No identification. Cause of death was complications after receiving a contaminated blood transfusion. The floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. A dead man. A life lost because of the scheme Lenore was a part of. I looked at my wife and saw her face as white as the walls of our living room. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide, fixed on Hayes. No, it can't be, she mumbled. We have information that the blood came from a diversion scheme at Metropolitan General Hospital, Hayes continued relentlessly. A scheme that, according to an anonymous tip, the lady is a part of. Lenore stumbled to the sofa and collapsed onto it, as if her legs could no longer support her. I didn't know, she stammered. Hayes watched her with a mixture of compassion and firmness. Mrs. Thorne, this isn't just about theft or illegal commerce anymore. We're talking about involuntary manslaughter. A person died. The words floated in the room like a toxic cloud, poisoning the air, suffocating us. A person died because of the blood bags Lenore was transporting, because of the money we were receiving without asking questions. Hayes turned to me. Elijah, grab IDs for both of you. We need to go now. I nodded mechanically and went to the bedroom to get our documents. When I returned to the living room, I found Lenore still sitting on the sofa, her face buried in her hands. Hayes was standing by the window, looking out at the street. "I'm ready," Lenore said suddenly, getting up. Her voice was strangely calm now, her eyes dry. "Let's just get this over with." The three of us left into the cold night of South Detroit. The unmarked police car was parked in front of our house. Some curious neighbors were already peeking through their windows, curtains discreetly pulled aside. As Hayes opened the car door for us to get in, Lenore turned to me. Her eyes, which I had known for so long, which I had seen smile, cry, shine with joy and sorrow, were now empty. "I hope you're satisfied, Elijah," she murmured. "You destroyed everything." Before I could answer, she got into the car, and I followed, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. As the car drove away from our house, away from our life, I wondered if I had done the right thing, if it was worth destroying 50 years of marriage, our family, our history together. Then I remembered the dead man, the contaminated blood, the lives at risk, and I knew I had no choice, that sometimes love means doing what is right, even when it breaks your heart. The ride to the precinct was in deathly silence. Lenore stared blankly out the window, as if memorizing the streets of Detroit that she might not see for a long time. I kept my trembling hands rested on my knees, trying to control my breathing, which seemed increasingly difficult. The Precinct 12 station was busy, even at this hour of the night. Hayes led us down a side corridor, avoiding the main entrance where reporters were already gathering. Apparently, the news of the blood diversion scheme had already leaked to the press. We were taken to a small room with a table, a few chairs, and an antique fan that spun lazily on the ceiling. Hayes asked us to wait and left, closing the door behind him. We were alone, Lenore and I, avoiding looking at each other. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. Time seemed to drag. "Why, Elijah," she finally broke the silence. Her voice was hoarse, tired. "Why didn't you talk to me first? Why did you go straight to the police?" I turned to her, incredulous. "I did talk to you last night in the garage. You told me I had no choice, that I had to forget what I had seen." She shook her head, a gesture of annoyance I knew so well after all those years. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me, Lenore," I exclaimed, unable to contain my frustration. "Explain how this is justified, how you managed to sleep knowing what you're doing." She looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw tears in her eyes. "You really think I'm a monster, don't you? That I'm doing this out of greed, out of malice. And aren't you?" "At first, it was out of necessity," she said, her voice betraying an emotion she could no longer hide. "When Kendra approached me, I had just found out I needed knee surgery, remember? You had just gotten out of the hospital after that heart problem. The medical bills were suffocating us." I vaguely remembered. It had been a tough period, about 5 years ago. My insurance had denied coverage for some procedures, claiming pre-existing conditions. She said it was just once, Lenore continued, that a private client urgently needed blood for a surgery, and the hospital was short, that they would pay very well, and that no one would get hurt. "And you believed her?" "I wanted to believe," she corrected, wiping a tear with the back of her hand. "I needed to believe. That first payment covered 3 months of our son's mortgage. Do you remember how desperate he was? Facing foreclosure?" I remembered. Our son had gone through a rough patch when the company he worked for suddenly closed. His mortgage was heavy, and their savings quickly dried up. We had helped with what we could, but I never imagined the money came from this source. "After that, it got easier," she continued, her gaze lost somewhere on the wall in front of me. "Once a month, then twice. Kendra handled everything inside the hospital. She falsified records, diverted bags. I just picked them up and dropped them off. I got my cut. And who were they selling to, Lenore? She hesitated. Small private clinics, mostly. Some didn't even have official licenses. Others did, but they were cutting costs by buying outside the system. And they didn't care about the safety, the quality of that blood, whether it was contaminated or expired. Kendra guaranteed me she only took tested safe bags. I believed her. Her voice faltered on the last part, as if only now she realized the naivety or convenience of that belief. Before we could continue, the door opened and Hayes entered, accompanied by a tall man in a suit who introduced himself as Captain Mendoza. Mrs. Lenore Thorne, he began formally, you are being detained for questioning on suspicion of participation in a scheme involving the diversion and illegal commerce of blood products, in addition to possible indirect involvement in involuntary manslaughter. Lenore nodded silently, as if she had already been expecting this. Mr. Thorne, the captain continued, turning to me, you are not under investigation at this time, but we will need your full statement as a witness. I understand, I replied, feeling a knot in my throat. You'll have a few minutes to talk before Mrs. Thorne is transferred to the Women's Correctional Facility. We'll be outside. They left, leaving us alone again. The fan on the ceiling continued its circular motion, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath it. Lenore seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few hours. Her shoulders hunched, her face marked not just by the wrinkles of time, but by the weight of guilt that finally seemed to have caught up to her. That man who died, she murmured. Who was he? I don't know. Hayes didn't give details. She nodded slowly. It doesn't matter, really. It could have been anyone. It could have been you. The realization seemed to hit her like a lightning bolt. Her eyes widened dramatically. Her breathing hitched. My God, Elijah. It could have been you. Or our son. Or Wesley. I saw the horror in her eyes. The true horror of someone who finally understood the consequences of her actions. It was no longer about money, or financial aid, or justifications. It was about a life lost, about real risks. I never meant to, she stammered. Her words were choked with emotion. I know, I replied, and I realized that despite everything, I still believed that. Lenore was not a bad person. Deep down, she was someone who had made terrible choices, who had allowed herself to be drawn down a dark path, but she wasn't a monster. What's going to happen to Wesley? She asked, her voice thick. How are we going to explain that Grandma is in jail? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Wesley. So small, so innocent. How would we explain it? What would we say? We'll protect him, I answered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. For now, we'll say, you're traveling, visiting a sick relative or something. She nodded, grateful, for the merciful lie. And our son, that was another painful question. How to tell our only son that his mother, the woman who raised him with so much love, who cared for him through every sickness, who supported him through every difficulty, was involved in a criminal scheme that resulted in someone's death. I'm going to have to tell him the truth, I said finally. He deserves to know. Lenore closed her eyes, as if trying to block out the image of her son, discovering the truth about her. When she opened them again, they were filled with a sad resolution. You're right. No more lies, no more secrets. The door opened, and Hayes appeared. It's time. Lenore slowly stood up. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I got up too and hugged her. Despite everything, the anger, the disappointment, the betrayal, she was still the woman with whom I had shared 50 years of my life, the mother of my son, the grandmother of my grandson. I'm sorry, Elijah, she whispered against my shoulder, for everything, for what I did, for what I destroyed. I'm sorry too, I replied. And it was true. I was sorry for what she had done, for what I had been forced to do, for the family that had been torn apart. Hayes waited patiently until we separated. Then he gently led Lenore out of the room. Before leaving, she turned back one last time. "Take care of him," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Don't let him think bad of me." "Never," I promised. And it was a promise I intended to keep, no matter how difficult it would be. After she left, Hayes returned and took me to another room, where I spent the next few hours giving my formal statement. I told them everything. How Wesley had smelled the odor in the car. How I discovered the blood bags, Lenore's confession, the 5-year scheme. It was nearly dawn when I was finally released to go home. The house that now seemed too big, too empty, without Lenore. The next day, the police operation was launched early. Based on the information I provided and previous investigations, they arrested more than 15 people, including Kendra, hospital staff, and owners of the black market clinics that were buying the blood. The case made headlines across newspapers and news broadcasts. Ring diverted blood from public hospital. Contaminated blood causes patient death. Retired Metropolitan General employee key player in criminal scheme. I couldn't watch the news. Every headline was like a stab, reminding me that the criminal they described was my wife, the woman I loved for half a century. Our son rushed over as soon as he found out, incredulous, devastated. He cried like a child when I confirmed it was true, that his mother was truly involved. "How could she?" he asked through sobs. "How could she do something like that?" I had no answer. Or maybe I had too many, none of them satisfactory. The worst was when Wesley came the following weekend. His curious little eyes searching the house for his grandmother, his tiny voice asking, "Where's Grandma? Grandpa, isn't she back from her trip yet?" I had to swallow the lump in my throat and smile, lying to protect him. "Not yet, son. Grandma's going to be away for a while." "A long while?" "Maybe so, Wesley, maybe so." He accepted the explanation for now, with the ease children have for adapting to change, but I knew it wouldn't always be like that. One day, he would ask more questions. One day, we would have to tell him the truth. At the trial, which took place 6 months later, Lenore took full responsibility for her actions. She confessed everything, cooperated with authorities, providing names, dates, and amounts. Her cooperation helped dismantle not only this scheme, but other similar ones in different hospitals. The judge considered her advanced age, genuine remorse, and cooperation as mitigating factors. Even so, the sentence was heavy, 8 years of confinement. Lenore heard the verdict with her head bowed, accepting her fate. I was there, in the back row of the courtroom. Our eyes met as she was led away. There was no more rage in those eyes I knew so well. Only sadness, regret, and perhaps a spark of gratitude. Gratitude that I was still there, that I hadn't completely abandoned her despite everything. Life went on, as it always does. I sold our house. I couldn't bear living surrounded by bittersweet memories anymore, and I moved into a smaller apartment closer to our son's home. It was easier that way for looking after Wesley when they needed me to. I visited Lenore every 2 weeks at the Women's Correctional Facility. Our conversations were always difficult at first, heavy with guilt, regret, and a love that, despite everything, refused to completely die. Over time, we found a new rhythm, a new way to relate. It wasn't the same, it never would be, but it was something. Wesley asked about his grandmother less frequently now, distracted by new friends, new interests, as children always are. But sometimes, when I least expected it. He'd catch me off guard. "Grandpa, when is Grandma coming back from her trip?" And each time, it got harder to lie to those innocent eyes. One day, sitting on a park bench while watching Wesley play on the swings, I thought about everything that had happened, about the innocent question that changed everything. "Grandpa, why does Grandma's car smell like blood?" A simple observation from a child had unraveled a crime, potentially saved dozens of lives, and destroyed our family in the process. There were no true villains in this story, just imperfect people, making imperfect choices, trying to survive in a world that isn't always fair. Lenore had made terrible choices, driven by a combination of need, greed, and self-deception. I had made the painful choice to report her, driven by a sense of justice that overcame even my love. And now, I had another difficult choice to make: when and how to tell Wesley the truth. I watched him slide down the slide, laughing in that carefree way only children can. So oblivious to the adult drama that had redefined his family, so innocent. For now, I would let him continue that way. I would let him be just a child, protected from the harsh truths of the adult world. But one day, when he was older, I would tell him the full story. I would tell him how his innocent question about a strange smell in his grandmother's car revealed a terrible crime. I would tell him how his grandmother, despite doing something very wrong, wasn't a bad person, just a good person who made bad choices. I would tell him how sometimes doing the right thing means hurting the ones we love. And maybe, just maybe, when that day came, Wesley would understand. And perhaps, in some way, our broken family would find a path forward. Almost 2 years passed since that night I opened Lenore's car trunk. 2 years since our life completely turned upside down. 2 years of bi-weekly visits to the correctional facility, of Mviv explanations for Wesley, of rebuilding a life I never imagined having to reconstruct at 72 years of age. My new apartment is small but comfortable. A simple 2-bedroom unit in an old building in the suburbs, not too far from my son's house. The walls still seem bare, even after all this time. I couldn't bring many things from our old house. Too many bittersweet memories came with the objects. I preferred to start over as much as possible. The neighborhood is good. There's a park nearby where I take Wesley to play on weekends. He loves the playground, especially the swings. "Higher, Grandpa, higher," he always asks. And I push, carefully, watching his carefree laughter, feeling a pang in my heart as I think about everything that happened. Wesley is 7 years old now. He's grown so much in this time. He's smarter, more questioning, as is natural at that age. The questions about Lenore are becoming more frequent and more difficult to answer. "Why doesn't Grandma ever come back from her trips, Grandpa? Why can't we call her on the phone? The other kids have grandmas. Why is mine always away?" Each question is like a little stab. Each evasive answer weighs on my conscience. Our son and daughter-in-law try to help, reinforcing the story of the traveling grandmother, but they also suffer from the lies. The truth floats above us like a dark, inevitable cloud. The visits to the correctional facility have become a strange routine. Lenore is different, thinner, with completely white hair now, but with a serenity in her eyes that wasn't there before. The prison system is tough, especially for a woman her age, but she found a purpose. She teaches literacy classes to the younger inmates. She helps in the makeshift infirmary. "It's a way to atone," she told me once, "to try and do some good after so much wrong." On one of those visits about 6 months ago, Lenore surprised me with a question. "When are you going to tell Wesley, Elijah? He must be asking questions already." I swallowed, looking away. "He's too young, Lenore. How do you explain something like that to a child?" She sighed, her hands, now with age spots even more visible, holding mine across the visiting table. "He deserves to know the truth. Simplified for his age, of course, but a lie like that is going to get harder and harder to maintain. And when he finds out, because he will one day, the damage will be greater." I knew she was right. The lie was becoming unsustainable, snowballing. The longer it went on, the worse the impact would be when the truth came out. The following week, I sought out a child psychologist, Dr. Marina, a gentle, middle-aged woman who listened to our whole story without judgment. She guided me on how to approach the subject with Wesley in a way that was appropriate for his age. "Children understand more than we imagine," she explained, "and they have an incredible capacity to process difficult truths when they are presented with honesty and love." We carefully planned how the conversation would go. Dr. Marina suggested it happen in a familiar, safe environment, perhaps with Wesley's parents present for support, that we use simple language, without confusing euphemisms, but also without unnecessary disturbing details. Tell him the truth, but adapted for him, that Grandma did something wrong, that she broke an important rule, and now she needs to be away for a while as a punishment. Children understand the concept of rules and consequences. I talked with my son and daughter-in-law. They hesitated initially. It was a heavy burden to place on such a young child. But after talking with the psychologist too, they agreed that the path of truth, as difficult as it was the best one for Wesley in the long run. We chose a Sunday. Wesley had spent the afternoon with me playing in the park, getting ice cream, and watching cartoons. When we arrived at his parents' house, they were already waiting for us in the living room with serious but welcoming expressions. "Wesley, Grandpa has something important to talk to you about," my son began, seating him on the sofa between us. I looked into those innocent eyes, that curious little face, and felt my heart clench. How to explain something so complex, so painful, to a child? But it was necessary. "My son," I began, my voice choked, "do you remember how we always say that Grandma Lenore is traveling?" He nodded, his big eyes fixed on me. "Well, that's not exactly true. Grandma isn't traveling. She's in a special place, a place where people who did something wrong need to be for a while." Wesley frowned, confused. "Like a timeout?" "Yes," I replied, grateful for the simplicity of a child's mind. "Like a timeout. Grandma did something she shouldn't have. She broke a very important rule." "What did she do?" The inevitable question. I exchanged a look with my son, who nodded encouragingly. "She took things that weren't hers from a hospital, important things that other people needed." Wesley thought for a moment, processing the information. "Like when Julia took my toy car at school without asking." "Something like that," I agreed. "But with something much more serious, much more important. And that's why Grandma's timeout is also more serious. She needs to be in that special place for a while." "How long?" "A few years, Wesley." His little eyes widened. "Years? That's a long time, Grandpa." "Yes, it is a long time. But that doesn't change how much Grandma loves you. She misses you very much. She talks about you every time we talk." He was silent for a few moments, absorbing everything. Then the question I had feared. Can I visit her in that place? I looked at my son, uncertain. We had discussed that possibility with the psychologist. She thought a supervised visit could eventually be beneficial, but maybe not right away. "Maybe one day," I answered cautiously. "It's a place for grown-ups. It's not very nice for kids, but we can send her drawings, letters. I can take pictures of you when I go visit her." Wesley seemed to accept that answer, but then came the question that surprised me. Was it because of the smell in her car, Grandpa? The memory hit me like a flash. That Sunday, almost 2 years ago when it all started, I had no idea he still remembered that. You remember that, son? He nodded. It smelled like the butcher shop, and Grandma got mad when we said it. I swallowed, surprised by his vivid memory. Yes, Wesley. It was because of that. You noticed something important that day. So I helped them find out Grandma was doing something bad. It was a complicated question. How to explain that? Yes, he had been the unwitting catalyst for this whole situation, without making him feel guilty. You told the truth, son. It's always important to tell the truth, even when it's hard. You didn't do anything wrong. He nodded, seeming to accept that explanation. After a few more questions, some we managed to answer, others we had to simplify greatly, he seemed satisfied, at least for now. Can I make a drawing for Grandma? He asked finally. Of course you can, I replied, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude for a child's resilience. In the following weeks, Wesley made several drawings for Lenore, portraits of the family, of him playing soccer, of our trip to the Detroit Zoo, colorful scribbles full of love and innocence. I took them all on my visits and saw Lenore's eyes fill with tears as she received them. He knows? She asked, holding the drawings like treasures. Yes, we told him a simplified version. He understood it in his own way. She nodded, running her fingers over the colorful strokes. Did he ask about that day? About the smell in the car? He remembers, Lenore. He remembers in detail. She closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely. My God, how did a 5-year-old child end up involved in something so terrible? There was no answer to that, only the heavy silence of shared guilt. In the subsequent visits, Lenore began writing letters to Wesley, with my help to admit the content. Simple letters talking about how much she missed him, asking about school, about his friends, never mentioning where she was, but never again lying about being on a trip. The letters did both of them good. Wesley eagerly awaited them, and Lenore seemed to find a purpose in maintaining that connection, even from a distance. Over time, Wesley's questions about his grandmother became less frequent, less distressed. The situation, however abnormal, had become part of his reality. One Sunday afternoon, while we were fishing together at a lake outside the city, a new ritual we had created, Wesley surprised me with an observation. You know, Grandpa, Marcus from my class doesn't have a grandma either. Hers died. That's much worse, right? Because mine will come back one day. I swallowed the lump in my throat, moved by his ability to find comfort in the situation. Yes, son, one day she will come back. And it was true. Lenore had progressed to a work release program a few months earlier, thanks to good behavior and her advanced age. In a few years, she would be free again, different, marked by the experience, but free to rebuild the broken family bonds, especially with Wesley. Our relationship had changed too. We were no longer husband and wife in the traditional sense, but there was a bond that 50 years together creates, and not even that betrayal managed to completely destroy it. It was something different now. A friendship, perhaps, based on a shared history, a grandson we both loved, and an uncertain future that was not completely without hope. Sometimes, in the lonely nights in my small apartment, I think about that innocent question that changed everything. Grandpa, why does Grandma's car smell like blood? How could something so simple, so pure, the honesty of a child, have unleashed such a devastating storm? And yet, perhaps it was necessary. Perhaps it saved lives. Perhaps it put an end to something that, if it continued, could have caused even more harm. Life is like that, full of cruel ironies and unexpected beauties, full of difficult choices and consequences we have to live with. Lenore made grave mistakes. I did what I believed was right, no matter how painful it was. And in the midst of it all, a 5-year-old boy, with his innocent question, might have been the only true hero of the story. Today, Wesley turned 9 years old. We organized a small party in the community room of my building. Nothing too extravagant, just a few friends from school, his favorite chocolate cake, soda, and snacks. Seeing that smile on his face, his cheeks puffed out as he blew out the candles, made this entire difficult journey worthwhile. Lenore couldn't come, of course. Even in the work release program, her outings are limited, controlled. But she sent a gift, a remote-controlled car that she bought with the money she earns teaching classes at the correctional facility. She included a card written in her shaky handwriting, "To the most special grandson in the world, with all of Grandma's love." When I gave it to Wesley, his eyes lit up. "It's really from Grandma? She remembered my birthday?" "Of course she remembered," I replied, swallowing my emotion. She would never forget such an important date. He tore the wrapping paper with the typical excitement of a child, and was delighted with the car. He ran to show his friends, proud. "My grandma sent this." I watched him playing, running, laughing, and I thought about how children have this incredible capacity for adaptation. 4 years ago, his innocent question about the smell of blood in the car had unleashed a storm that transformed our lives. Now here he was, moving forward, integrating that complex reality into his developing worldview. Life continued for all of us in ways we never would have imagined. Lenore served half her sentence and now works during the day at a public library, returning to the facility at night. It's a quiet job, suitable for a woman her age, and she seems to find peace among the books. Little by little, she is rebuilding her dignity, her identity, beyond the terrible mistakes she made. Our son and his wife had another daughter or two. Years ago. Little Sophia will never know her grandmother in prison. By the time she's old enough to understand, Lenore will already be free. It's a blessing in disguise, perhaps. And I continue my quiet life in the Detroit apartment. I started going to a senior center nearby. I play dominoes on Wednesdays. I participate in a choir on Fridays. Small joys to fill the days. Once in a while, I still wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, reliving that night in the garage, the discovery, the horror. But those episodes are becoming rarer. About a year ago, I received an unexpected letter. It was from the family of the man who died because of the contaminated blood, the one whose death precipitated the whole investigation. I don't know how they got my address, probably through the police or the court process. The letter wasn't accusatory, as I feared. It was grateful. The widow wrote to thank me for my courage in reporting the scheme, even though it involved my own wife. She said that although nothing could bring her husband back, knowing that those responsible had been punished brought some comfort. And more importantly, a son. The dismantling of the ring had saved countless other lives. I cried reading those words. I cried for the man I never knew. Marcus Jones, 42 years old, married, 2 children. I cried for his family, for all the lives affected by that terrible scheme. I cried for Lenore, for myself, for our grandson, who had to grow up with that shadow over our family. But there was also a strange sense of peace in those tears, the confirmation that despite the pain, despite the high personal cost, I had done the right thing. A month after the letter, I visited the man's grave. Roberto? No. Marcus. Marcus Jones. I took flowers. I stayed for a few silent minutes. I wasn't religious. Never was. But in that moment, I felt the need for some ritual, some way of acknowledging the invisible connection between us, between my family and his, united by this tragedy. I told Lenore about the visit. She cried as she rarely did, and asked that when she could leave without escort, I take her there. I need to ask forgiveness, too, she said, even if he can't hear me. Wesley's party ended with hugs, thank yous from the other kids' parents, and the typical mess that remains afterward. Scattered paper cups, cake crumbs, deflated balloons. My son and daughter-in-law helped clean up, while Wesley played with his new gifts, exhausted but happy. When they were about to leave, Wesley hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa. It was the best birthday." I caressed his hair, now darker than in early childhood, and felt that immense love only a grandparent can feel. "You're welcome, son." He hesitated for a moment. Then he asked softly, "Will Grandma be able to come to my next birthday?" The question surprised me. It had been a long time since Wesley had talked about Lenore visiting us. "I don't know, son. Maybe. We'll pray that she can." He nodded thoughtfully. "I already told my friends that my grandma can't come because she did something wrong and is in timeout. They understood. Lucas's dad is also in jail, so he knows what it's like." A child's frankness is sometimes unsettling, but also liberating. Without the weight of adult judgment, children manage to reduce complex situations to their essence. "You are a very special boy. You know that," I said, hugging him again. "Grandma says so, too," he replied with a smile before running to his parents' car. I watched the car drive away, waving until it turned the corner. Then I returned to my silent apartment. On the living room table was a photo of Lenore and Wesley, taken many years ago when he was still a baby. She held him with so much love, so much pride. Who could have imagined what fate held in store for our family? I thought about everything that had happened since that fateful Sunday. When a 5-year-old boy smelled a strange odor in his grandmother's car and unknowingly set off a storm that would transform so many lives. I thought about choices and consequences, second chances and redemption. I thought about Lenore, who despite everything was trying to rebuild some dignity, some purpose amid the ruins of what she had done. I thought about Marcus Jones and his family, about how a corrupt system had stolen a father, a husband, a son, leaving a void that would never be filled. And I thought about Wesley growing up in the middle of all this, learning difficult lessons about right and wrong, about love and forgiveness, long before he should have. Life is never simple, never black and white. We live in shades of gray, amidst imperfect choices, trying to do the best we can with the hand we are dealt. Lenore made terrible choices, driven by a mixture of need, greed, and self-deception. I made the painful choice to report her, sacrificing our marriage, our family, in the name of a greater good that seemed abstract and distant at the time. Neither of us emerged unscathed. Neither of us is the same person we were before that night in the garage. But perhaps there is some redemption in this story. Perhaps from the ashes of this tragedy, we can build something that, if not perfect, at least holds some meaning, some value. And maybe, in the end, that is the best lesson we can leave for Wesley. That mistakes, even the most serious ones, do not define a person forever. That genuine remorse and sincere effort to repair the damage caused matter. That forgiveness, though difficult, is possible, and that true, unconditional love survives even the greatest storms. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, two of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.